we think that it's important that that these discussions are recorded. So following the webinar, we will share the recording on our social media channels, and you will be able to rewatch in case there is some particular element that you want to re-listen. So with that, I will stop here, and I will pass the floor to our first speaker from the European Commission. I'm very happy to have here with us today Sotirios Kanellopoulos from DG Environment. He is a policy officer. He joined recently DG Environment, and of course in his work he's mainly focusing on the Green Deal, also on the data spaces, and he's also following different kind of projects related to digital transition, and he's also focusing on environment and sustainability. And today we will hear more what the Commission is doing on the biodiversity front, and also different elements such as a reporting obligation for companies, or for instance carbon capture. So Sotirios, welcome, and I will pass the floor to you. I know that you have some slides to share, so I will give you some time to set up your screen.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks, Davina. Good morning from Brussels. I'll just click here to make sure that you can see the slides. I hope now that you do.
Yes, we can see it.
That's great. Excellent. Well, as I said, greetings from Brussels. Thank you for the invitation. Really excited to participate today to this webinar. My name is Sotirios Kanellopoulos. I work for DG Environment. Perhaps DG Environment doesn't make the specific reference, but my unit does. I work for 01, which is about strategy, digitalization, better regulation, and economic analysis. And myself, together my kind and dear colleague, Jori Robrecht, we work on the digitalization files. And well, this means that we have basically 4 core tasks. And we work at the interface of IT and environment. And practically this means that we are looking to data, to emerging ICT technologies, and we check how they can contribute to net positive impacts in pressing environmental issues. And as you can see, our first core task is about the Green Deal data space. Well, we like to see ourselves as supporters to the development and implementation of the Green Deal data space in order to achieve its dual role, which is on one hand to achieve the Green Deal objectives, and on the other hand to unlock the European data market, the European data single market actually. A part of that task is the Inspire Directive, which I suppose you know, so we consider this to be in the same family of under the same task, and the Green Data for All, but I'm not going to see more on that for the moment. I suppose you're familiar with the Inspire Directive. The other tasks are the geospatial intelligence, which practically means how Earth observation and processing of Earth observation data can help in designing better policies, implementing policies, and doing compliance checks. The last task is about digital coordination, which means that we are practically the interlocutors with other internal Commission services when it comes to initiatives that have to do with data and digital technologies. And the last task is about corporate data policy, which is about helping DG Environment to become more a data-driven organization. But today, we're going to focus on the Green Deal data space, of course, and let's see together what I have prepared for you. So I will start with a basic question. So the basic question is how regulation that is relevant to biodiversity can potentially boost the demand for data, and in the context of the Green Deal data space, how this can create new use cases, and how can unlock flows of data within the European single market. And then I try to answer this question by following 2 pathways. So the first pathway is around the biodiversity strategy for 2030 and all the offspring regulations that follow that strategy. And the second pathway is focusing more on sectorial regulations that are indirectly linked to biodiversity. For instance, the corporate sustainability reporting directive that was launched at the end of last year, and other regulations as well. And then at the end, I try to outline a little bit what are the opportunities that most likely will come out for the Green Deal data space. And of course, these are just some reflections. It's a, let's say, the snapshot of the internal initial discussions that are happening and the brainstorming. So it's not really the Commission's view, it's rather than just to steer the debate, let's say, looking from the policy angle. Some things eventually will be filtered out, some things will stay, but we definitely hope to contribute to the constructive argument around the Green Deal data space and the opportunities arising, as I said, from the policy angle. So, as I promised, first pathway, the biodiversity strategies and laws. I'm sure you're familiar about that. In 2020, it was launched the Biodiversity Strategy of 2030, a quite ambitious one. It requires protected areas to cover at least 30% of land in Europe and at least 30% of sea in Europe, and restore degraded ecosystems. And to this end, there were many follow-up or offspring strategies and laws and regulations that came out. And just to name a few, the forest strategy, the soil strategy, the nature restoration law, and then a little bit ahead, there will be probably a forest monitoring and planning law, proposal for a soil health law, the EU pollinators initiative is ongoing, and so on. And these are just a few. I'm sure there might be others. As I said, I'm working on the interface of IT and environment, so the thematic policy officers are, let's say, they have more insights, but more or less this outlines the situation. And common thing that all these strategies have is that they are bringing with them monitoring and reporting plans and requirements, and which, of course, on top or improving those that are already in place. And apparently, this will increase demand for data and services regarding biodiversity, be it Earth observation data or be in situ data or else. And apart from that, there's often a link between those strategies and legacy systems. And when I say legacy systems, I mean existing systems for data reporting. And I suppose those systems will be enriched. And just to name a few, later on in this session, we will hear about EMODnet. So I'm really looking forward to that presentation. But there are other systems, the Forest Information System for Europe. I would dare also to mention the Inspired geoportals for member states and the European catalogs, the European Soil Data Center, and even others. So I think at the end, it will be interesting to see how these systems will play a role in the Green Deal data space and in general in the data spaces. And in fact, looking at opportunities, I think there's an opportunity for some kind of an integration strategy between the legacy systems and the Green Deal data space, but also other open repositories out there. For instance, the Nodo platform, or you know, all these repositories that where research projects and academic initiatives, they in order when they're doing open publication, they're obliged to also put their data there. So I think this is an interesting exercise to think a little bit how the Green Deal data space will connect with all these systems, be it public ones, be it open repositories. And I just put here a link about an initiative I didn't know, but I heard quite recently about something that Google is piloting about a dataset search engine. So it's quite intuitive. It's like an environment like Google, the regular environment Google, where you just put some keywords about datasets, and then there's some you know, a list of outcomes where you can potentially find the data that you're looking at. And I think, and I just put it here as an example to demonstrate the kind of low-hanging and high-hanging fruits. And I think this kind of some kind of a catalog service with some search capabilities would be a nice point to start with. But of course, there are challenges coming with that later on about the data quality, the data ingestion. if people decide to actually download the data, what would be the format, with the quality, especially for data coming not from the legacy systems, but from the open repositories. I think these are open issues to discuss. And the other opportunity we see, and this comes from the advice from my thematic policy officers here in DG Environment, is that apart from the legacy systems and for different sectors in the biodiversity areas, there are some fragmented proprietary non-public, let's say, databases around Europe. And an open question we have is how to incentivize further data sharing from those parts. In the staff working document, the Commission about data spaces last year, there's a reference to a model where data are exchanged for data, and this format could also be generalized in the sense of data be exchange of some kind of tokens or some kind of other benefits, like governance rights and so on. So this is another point, another question actually, for which we don't have the answer, but we would like to brainstorm a little bit more about how to incentivize data sharing from those sources, proprietary ones. Now I'm shifting to the second part of my presentation, which is the second pathway. So the regulations that are indirectly linked to biodiversity are sectorial regulations that have some reference to biodiversity. So on that aspect, recently the European Commission has made corporate sustainability reporting obligatory for most undertakings in Europe. And not only that, the European Commission invited EFRAG, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, to draft the European Sustainability Reporting Standard. So the Commission is trying to standardize a little bit the landscape of ESG reporting, and because obviously there are so many standards out there, and I think this is towards a good direction. And according to that standard that is already published, there are provisions. Of course, there will be sectorial versions, but there are provisions already there about biodiversity, and there's a clear reference that companies need to report on the biodiversity impacts at facility level, let's say. And yes, and as I said, there will be sectorial versions. So I don't know if there are already some, but just for the sake of the example, in the mining industry, if we just look into widely applied standard that's called Towards Sustainable Mining, the TSM protocol, then there's one of the pillars is biodiversity, and there's a clear requirement for conservation plannings and reporting at mine facility level and so on. And so, having said that, how a new demand for data is created, how data market is benefited, because undertakings will need to monitor and make reports by using data that they collect themselves or they buy from Earth observation or from the European Copernicus or space programs and so on. And then they deliver the data to those who need to know, be it auditors, be it the public sector, be it other companies in the case of ESG and so on. So we see a pattern where this kind of reporting unlocks demand for data and unlocks flows of data. But of course, it's interesting to investigate further in practice. Along the same lines, it's the next regulation that's again indirectly linked to biodiversity, and it has to do with deforestation. So the initiative aims to minimize consumption of products causing deforestation or forest degradation. So in other words, the Commission, the European Union in general, they want to increase the demand for deforestation-free commodities and products. And one could think of many ways of how to monitor the origin of products and make links to deforestation. And the initiative, the regulation itself makes clear reference to Earth observation data, to field surveys, and to isotope testing in order to link with the geographical areas. And of course, everything is conditional first to suppliers georeferencing the plots of the land where the relevant commodities are produced. And then as soon as we have that, the first question is the plot accurate? So does the product really originates from that plot? And the second question, if it's accurate, is it inside an area where is going through a deforestation process or degradation. And I think from the Green Deal data space point of view, again, there are opportunities where there will be some data demand and clear, obvious case is Earth observation for checking the plots against deforestation. And I'm sure there are already services being developed in the market. And the rest, the second probably point or case worth checking is the isotope testing, where, as far as I understand, these checks are done by data banks or through data banks that are not open. And perhaps this doesn't make a lot of sense to include those data banks in the data space, but perhaps it would make sense to think of models where data from different databases are shared in order to train and develop new data banks for products that there's nothing already out there. But of course, this comes with a question mark. And last is the regulation that has to do with carbon capture or removals. And obviously, as you probably know, for the residual, let's say, the residual emissions where specific industries will be really difficult to abate, like agriculture, cement industry, steel, and aviation, there is a provision that these emissions will be offset by carbon capture removal credits. And this is acknowledged in the Paris Agreement, as well in the climate law in Europe. And in order to have high quality credits, the Commission is looking to establish a certification system in the Union, and of course with the expectation that the number of credits will increase in the future. So introducing some digital monitoring tools is something that we could consider. And this regulation makes explicit reference to, as a good example, let's say, or as a good paradigm, to land use monitoring methods using GIS systems, remote sensing, including tools from Copernicus and so on. And obviously all this information is quite useful in order to instill trust in carbon removals related to biodiversity. And again, the pattern is the same. Data would be collected in order to make reports and then share with those who need to know, like auditors, like customer companies who buy the offsets, or even the civil society overall. And this could happen as well in the setting of the green data space. All right, so I'm about to finish. So just a quick recap. Starting from a recent proposal from the Commission, I tried to reflect a little bit on how the green data space could contribute with impactful use cases. And of course, these are just reflections to steer the debate. As I said from the beginning, these things have to be, of course, considered from you, the community, and the project, and see what would make sense and what would make sense and what's already happening out there in the market. We follow two pathways. The first is the pathway that is set by the Diversity Strategy 2030 in the offspring regulations. The second is the path that is set by the regulations indirectly linked to biodiversity, be it the corporate sustainability report directive, deforestation regulation, carbon removal certificates. There could be others, and we try to see what kind of opportunities are there for the green data space in regards of biodiversity. Of course, implementing those regulations is the first important half of the job, but the other half is also to ensure integrity in monitoring and reporting, as well deliver data and transparency for those who need to know. And we mentioned many times that those are public sector, investors, auditors, companies, NGOs, and this might make some sense in the green data space context. So I stop here. Thanks again for the opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to listen to the following presentations. Nevina, back to you. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Sotiros. I hope my sound and the video is back. So before we would move on, I would just encourage everyone to use the Q&A function. So there you can share some questions This time we agreed that we will follow the agenda, and then we will answer the questions that you are asking towards the end, or maybe even during the discussion. So with that, I will pass the floor to my colleague from the project, Dainius Massiliunas from the Wageningen University and research. He will be your moderator today. He's a lecturer and he's also following the Green Deal Data Space project. So Dainius, the floor is yours, and please introduce your speakers. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nelena. Indeed, today we have two sets of speakers. One is from EMODnet and the other one is from IPSAT. And let's start with EMODnet. So from EMODnet, we have Kate Larkin, the head of EMODnet Secretariat, and Joanna Bea, who is the coordinator for EMODnet Biology and member of the EMODnet Central Portal technical team. From the side of IPSAT, we have Valerio Caraselli, who is the CEO of IPSAT.
Hello.
Yeah. So we will have a presentation from both of them, and the first one is by IPSAT. So feel free to present and also say a bit more about yourself.
Here I am. So. Okay, you saw the screen, I think, yeah?
Yes, always good.
Okay, thanks to Dainius, and thanks to all the team from Great Project. Is a very big opportunity for us. A few words about me and my company. I'm Valerio Caraselli. I'm the owner of IPTSat. We are a GIS and remote sensing company in Italy. We work in the field of environment is from 20 years. So we start about thinking on biodiversity data and analysis. Because one of our customer asked for a POC to start a test project with to solve their problem, to have all the possible data from biodiversity sources inside one database is a big challenge, but they have this type of problem. So we start a POC, and after 2 years ago, and after that we develop a first project for them, and this is where we start. We found that this type of company, large company that work in the field of, in our case, is solar and wind energy. They have a lack monitoring and controlling and measuring the biodiversity in their process. So we saw also that in recent studies during the different process among solar and wind plant assessment, most of the operators use less than 40% of cartographic sources, and we found also that there are a lot of sources in international database or website, and also in local area. So the challenges that we start with the first POC want to mix official biodiversity data and maps and mix this type of information with local data. For example, in Italy, there is a national biodiversity portal managed by the Ministry of Environment, that have a lot of information that in our case the team of this company don't use. We want also to mix the citizen science sources like GBIF and iNaturalist, and put on top of this data satellite images. First of all, the Copernicus sources. So we develop for this region, with this focus, we develop a geographic decision support system that allow operator to have access in a single data hub of all these type of sources, so they can understand the situation of a single area all over the country. We have developed this tool in Italy for now. They can have a clear view of all this type of information and data all over Italy. So this is a first look of our tool. We have developed this tool only on a web way, so the customer go directly on with their access, go directly on the web tool and can make a list of analysis. First of all, I want you to show a rapid list of all the information that we put inside the system. So we put UCN information, we put all the the database that we found interesting and necessary to make an assessment on biodiversity loss. So Ramsar zone, K biodiversity area, world protected area, world protected area from Italian country, that sometimes is different. We have a lot of more detailed polygon on protected areas. We have a list of coastal zone, Poseidonia zone, all over the coastal area. So we try to put inside the tool all the information related to species and flora and from flora and fauna. And also we put the GBIF information from for sure the database, filtered with the observation that are sensitive, with species that are sensitive to wind and solar infrastructure. We found a very interesting document from UCN that defined the impact of a specific type of species that have an impact in solar and wind plant generation. So we take the list of these species and we define and figure out these species from all our sources. So we make another type of geographic layer to underline this type of species for the customer. This is other type of lift or layer. And for example, this is an example of our tool. The customer can put inside our tool the area of interest they want to analyze, and make a buffer near this area, and the system will generate a report in PDF and also in CSV format that give the possibility to the customer to have a clear view of all the species and the protected area that are near their plant or near the area where they want to build the plant. This is very, very important. We also decide to put inside this this list of the data set also satellite images. We will start with Sentinel-2 imagery because it's very useful to have the satellite data with on top also the information of species and or protected area, so that the customer are able to understand also in a graphical way, in a graphical view the area that they are where they want to build a new plant, a new infrastructure. In this case, it is possible also to make more than to put more than one images that is related, for example, to the to the most updated data. It is important also sometimes to add the information from historical data. So in this case, we are working on this new tool. It's not already done, but we are working on to put directly the API from Copernicus Hub to retrieve also the historical information. We finish also to put on the system because it is a focus on solar and wind potential company or customer, sorry. We also make two types of solar and wind maps to show where is possible, where is the best opportunity to have the best solar irradiation or the best wind speed, so the customer can also see biodiversity data with potential best area to try to have all the data to make the right decision. This is the focus of our system. I will finish. This is the next step where we want to go in the next months. So we want to test artificial intelligence to make automatic alert monitoring. We want to put a grid with an already made risk analysis. We are looking for the best model to do that. We want to introduce and automate the Copernicus service from Land and Climate Hub, and introduce also the possibility for the customer to have not only Copernicus data that is free, is 10-meter resolution, but also high resolution satellite images to have the best resolution to show the area, and the other two line of development is to introduce the new REST service from GBIF and iNaturalist, and in the end of next year try to test the same tool in a 3D version, because sometimes the data have also this type of capability to show in 3D. So this is a very rapid excursion of our tool. Feel free to send in this panel the question, and thanks to all.
Yes, thank you, Valerio, for your presentation. It's very nice to have the overview of the tool, and I think it was a very nice showcase of how to combine different data sets to achieve this particular goal. And also thanks a lot for IPSAT for reaching out to us in the first place and joining the community of the GREAT project. We definitely appreciate having input from independent parties. And also we're happy to be hosting you here today.
Thank you.
All right, now let's move to EMODnet and to Kate, who is going to be presenting more about the EMODnet initiative. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all.
Yes, we see your presentation. And our full screen, yes.
Yes, okay, very good. So good morning, my name is Kate Larkin from the EMODnet Secretariat. Today we're going to present to you about the European Marine Observation and Data Network, which is a public European Union operational marine in situ data service. And I'd like to first, before starting, recognise that this is a real collective input from the whole community. But in particular today, I'd like to thank Connor Delaney, who's the technical coordinator for the EMODnet Secretariat, Joanna Beja, who's the coordinator of EMODnet Biology from Vliz, Belgium, and Helen Woods, who's the coordinator of EMODnet Seabed Habitats, who's based at JNCC in the UK. So what I hope to do in the next few minutes is to take you through in a nutshell what EMODnet is, what its remit is, the added value to the community, show you some of the data and data products that EMODnet offers as a public service with a particular focus on the biodiversity theme, of course, and then really look forward to what the use of these data could be, what users are already utilising EMODnet for, and then maybe in the discussion we can delve a bit deeper into that. So firstly, EMODnet is an official service of the European Commission. So it's been repatriated and migrated to the Europa domain a couple of years ago already. It's a fully centralised service now, and it's an operational public data service focusing on marine data, and in particular the in situ or field data. And it's a marine knowledge initiative of the European Commission of DG Mare. So in a nutshell, as I mentioned, EMODnet focuses on the in situ data. So these are field data that are generally collected in the water, although it does include some bird observations as well. But we don't deal with satellite data. That's very much the remit of Copernicus Marine Service that we work closely with. EMODnet is very broad in the in situ marine data that it offers. It really covers surface to sea floor, coast to open ocean and deep ocean, and covering 7 broad thematics that you can see on the screen. And many of these, of course, are very relevant to biodiversity, either directly or really underpinning biodiversity assessments. And today we'll be focusing mostly on the biology and seabed habitat thematic areas. Within each of those thematics, you have hundreds of data parameters, and an added value of EMODnet is that once the data are standardized and assembled, the community of experts create added value data products on top, so maps and other composite data products that can be used by the community. It's driven by the experts themselves, so there's a huge amount of people, but also organizations involved in making EMODnet happen, and we'll look at the partnerships a little bit later on. And over the last decade and more, EMODnet has really moved forward with its operational status, and it's now considered a European authority and a best practice in this domain. So in terms of the wider landscape of Europe, there are, of course, many partnerships that, that EMODnet has, but just a little bit of context in terms of the European Green Deal data space that we're talking about today. EMODnet is very interoperable within its wide network across all of its thematics, and we'll look at the centralized portal and offer in a minute, but it also works very closely with other marine data services, for example, Copernicus Marine Service, to make sure that there is interoperability going forward for the marine data space in Europe itself. And so together, EMODnet and Copernicus Marine Service are really providing the backbone for that marine data space in collaboration with others, and that will form the backbone for the European Digital Twin and the associated data lake that will be required. And that in turn, of course, is a key component of the marine data space and the future Green Deal data space as well. And then together, all of the interoperable marine data, of which the biodiversity component, of course, is a huge part, is moving very much towards interoperability across data services so that these will be ready to meet the ambitious needs of users to meet the ambitious targets of European policies, such as the European Green Deal, Biodiversity Strategy, EU Mission, Restore Our Ocean and Waters, and more. I want to mention specifically for the Digital Twin Ocean, there is a project, Editor Infra, which EMODnet and Copernicus are working on at the moment to really upgrade the infrastructure and interoperability in this space. Then in terms of the added value, so EMODnet takes very diverse data from many different data providers and collectors across Europe, so not just research, but also private sector policy, NGOs, etc. And a real added value is this standardization and harmonization process, which is done very much in collaboration with national and regional data centers, with CDataNet, a European network of those centers, and implementing European and international standards. The Inspire directive has been mentioned already, but EMODnet from the start has really adhered to Inspire directives, and now with latest communications, which identify high value data sets in the Earth observation space, EMODnet is tracking that and is working ever more to adhere to all of these Inspire standards. And then the overarching principle that EMODnet follows as well is the FAIR data principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Now that the services are all centralized, the data and web services are much more harmonized across all of the thematics. They already use APIs to make sure that the data are not just accessible by a human searching, but also machine to machine readability, which is crucial for the future digital space. And also the data policy is the Creative Commons BY 4.0. The results of sharing the data together, if you click on the QR code, that will take you to the data and data product portfolio, which lists all of the available parameters right now. But this on the screen just shows you the added value really of unlocking and sharing all of the data so that you have point data from specific users that then can combine to create these integrated maps and other composite data products. And then if we look at the biodiversity thematics, on the left is an infographic which takes you through again the data portfolio of all EMODnet, but here on the screen now we just highlight the biology and seabed habitats offer. So these are sub themes within each of those broader thematics, and you can see biology goes right from phytoplankton up to marine mammals, and seabed habitats from specific point data up to composite data products, of which the EU CMAP, which we'll look at shortly, is part of, or a flagship, I should say, data product of. Of course, EMODnet's offer, all of the data products that it collates and that it brings together, is done very much in collaboration and partnership with other marine data services. And in this case, we're talking about marine biodiversity. So I've just put on the screen some of the key examples of those collaborations in the marine biodiversity space. There are, of course, many wider collaborations ongoing. But this really goes across the marine knowledge value chain, from the data collection efforts through to the marine data services and the users, and also across the board geographically from national to regional and European and international, because, for example, EMODnet Biology makes its services available also in collaboration with EuroBIS, the European Ocean Biodiversity Information System, which is in itself a regional initiative of OBIS, a global initiative. There's also links with ICES, for example, that there's a lot of partnership with, and EEA as well, increasing dialogue to make sure we optimize the data flows from the more legislative or requirement data collection that EEA is more responsible for, and EMODnet. So now, how does the user see and then access EMODnet products? On the screen, you can see what EMODnet looks like today. So since January 2023 of this year, we launched the fully centralized portal. So there's now just one portal to access everything that you need. That includes not just the portal itself, but a centralized and common map viewer where you can navigate all of the thematics, a central catalog which underpins that with all of the metadata describing, which is one search engine across the board now, and ERDAP facilities as well. The centralization process has allowed to unify the information across all of the different themes as well. So this really improves the user experience in terms of documentation and other tools. The central catalogue, as I've just mentioned, here you can browse through all of the different data and data products by using a search engine and accessing the metadata and data service information. And then if you go to the central map viewer, this is what you will see. And if you look at the middle left, the subset and download, this is where you can search for specific information if you're not, if you already know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you can start with the thematics and browse through. But I'm just going to show you now, if we click on the subset and download, some of the options. So one example here from biology, this is species occurrence data for orca, so Orcinus orca, so the killer whale, and you have filtered here for the specific species that you're looking for, and you can look at species occurrence. You can do on the map, draw the region that you're interested in, and then click on the download to download that subset of data. Here is a biology data product. So here we're looking at temporal changes in benthic communities. So this is only possible because of all the assembly and integration of data that EMODnet Biology makes these composite data products. And then for seabed habitats, EU CMAP is the most comprehensive broad-scale seabed habitat map for Europe. And here you can see that some of the products, including this EU CMAP, are available as direct download from the map viewer. You just click on the little I for information button, and then you can click on the download. You always have the metadata information as well to accompany this. And then we move on to looking at the uses of such data and data products. So for example, for seabed habitats, the regional sea commissions and the conventions, there are a lot of dialogue and interaction to see how the data of EMODnet can be used for regional assessments, quality status reports. We have this quote from OSPAR noting that because of the comprehensive nature of the EU CMAP, it's been able to fill gaps and enable more meaningful assessments, more evidence-driven assessments, if you like. Then for biology, this is a national marine management example where a consultancy and organisation Deltares was asked to really chart the distribution of reef building species, and they were able to use EMODnet data to do that, to then report to the Dutch Ministry for marine planning. And then an example on data interoperability. There's not just interoperability within one theme of EMODnet, but across the board. And the EMODnet thematics do interact a lot. And that's really increased now even more with centralization. But one example that was already a historic example was the collaboration between EMODnet Biology via Eurobis and both seabed habitats and the international OBIS has really facilitated this richer data set interoperability. So I'm just going to close by a couple of extra points, one being that EMODnet data is not only available through the central portal, which is your main flagship point of access, but if you're looking for more information in a more educational perspective or want to access EMODnet data in combination with other data, you can also go to the European Atlas of the Seas, which is an EC communication tool really designed for wider society, increasingly has teaching resources and educational material, and that also has a lot of biodiversity information as well. So thank you for your attention. Please do reach out and contact us because we are always welcoming your feedback. Please consider if there are data that would be relevant that could be ingested into EMODnet, and please save the date as well to join us in Brussels at the end of November this year for the next EMODnet Open Conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Kate. It was a nice overview, and EMODnet is definitely a very impressive initiative with a very big wealth of data specifically for the marine sector. So it's very nice to have an overview of it. All right, and now we will start the interactive panel. So I think the first thing to do would be to talk a little bit more about ourselves, to get to know each other a little bit more. And the first question that I have for everyone is to just say a little bit about yourself and what are your key responsibilities with regards to biodiversity and the Green Deal. So maybe I can start also from myself. So I am a member of the GREAT project, and specifically I am involved in the work package 5, which is about the data collection and inventory of data, and specifically also to prioritize data, which makes me quite interested in specifically the aspects with regards to data from both BioGIS and EMODnet, and how those are prioritized also. So maybe we can continue with Valerio.
Okay, thanks, Danius. So our focus in this case is to in the last 3, 5, 4 years is to show to our customers, to our industrial customer, that they have also a responsibility related to to climate, to biodiversity also. So understand that with the data that we have and that the data that we can acquire, for example, from satellite, we can also find a way to minimize the impact of their work.
Yeah, thank you. Kate, maybe you can continue.
Yes, so from the EMODnet perspective, for the the European marine data space and the Green Deal data space, I guess your EMODnet's real raison d'etre going forward, as it has been before, is to just make as much of the existing marine in situ data available, assembled and standardized and harmonized, so that it can then be interoperable for any user, whether it's within Europe or beyond, to both discover and then to download, whether it's through remote services connecting with other data services or not. Somebody's put in the chat about what do we know about the European marine data space. I mean, from the EMODnet perspective, we're just working very closely within our community to make sure all of the marine data from the in situ side is very much interoperable and to be used by users, to connect with those users, to make sure it's fit for use, and to ensure that we have the conversations of data sharing also with the private sector to really optimize and show them that there are public services like the data ingestion service that can help to submit and ingest data for such organizations. But the European, we see EMODnet as a key component of the European marine data space, but there are obviously other services as well working hard on their interoperability, and we have dialogues with them as well. So I wouldn't say the marine data space itself is a specific entity, it's just populated by these focal services such as EMODnet.
Yes, thank you. Joanna, do you have something to add from the biology point of view?
Well, I can say that, well, good morning, everyone, first of all. So as Kate mentioned, I'm the EMODnet biology coordinator. I work at VLIS in Belgium. And so basically, it's following Kate's comments, it's to make as much biodiversity data available as possible. And so we have a consortium of 20+ organizations. A lot of the data that we make available is submitted via these partner organizations, but we also work with ad hoc providers, and they can be researchers, or they can come from industry providers, or even NGOs that perform citizen science activities. So we don't have like just the one type of data coming to us that we then push forward. We also even though we kind of started more than 10 years ago, actually, by covering mostly species observation data, we are expanding more and more on different types of species data and making that also available. And that could be tracking by the use of tags. We will be working towards making genetics data available as well in the near future, very near future. Biological acoustic data, so identification of a species via the acoustic signals that they emit. So we're constantly expanding on the type of data that we publish and we make available for everyone. I think that summarizes it.
Yeah, thanks. That's very detailed data. That's very nice to hear. So the next question that I have for everyone is related with the data itself. And I would like to think a bit about the challenges that we face with regards to data, and to think a bit about what is the key challenge that you see with regards to biodiversity data that you experience? For example, whether it is about the data availability or the data quality or findability and such. So maybe Valeria, you can say something from the IPSAT perspective.
I think this is the very important question, because I think this is the big challenge when we talk about the biodiversity data, because from our side that we make an assessment for all the European country local portal, and we saw that interoperability is a very nice word, but so expensive to apply on real. So we can't spend some words on quality of data, because it's not our job. We can spend some words on the non-capability to some country or some administration, public administration, to make the data really available, because we still have data in format not readable, like PDF of 200 pages is not data, is very raw data. So I think that in this case is important to have everyone need to have the same focus on how to publish and make data available to all. So this is a very big challenge from our side.
Yeah, and you're saying that it's not something that you can do about the data quality, but then on the other hand, you can actually select the data sources, right? So
yeah,
do you have
the
a
data quality,
strategy?
Data quality is only scientific team or university can say that it's good quality or not good quality. From my side, it's important to have the official sources, and that official sources need to be publish data in a computer readable format, and it's not like that. Not always they publish the data in this way. So API is a very is our paradise when we saw API from this type of sources. So yeah, it's important to do a lot of work on that.
Yeah, indeed, it's very nice to hear from the user's perspective on the challenges of accessing the data. And I think indeed EMODnet has a lot of experience with providing these APIs that can be useful for the users. So I'm wondering indeed from the perspective of the data providers, what challenges do you face the most from EMODnet?
So I'll pass in a minute to Joanna for any biology or biodiversity specific thematic expertise. But just to mention that, I mean, the centralized portal, there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes from thematic experts and the data ingestion to have those conversations with the data providers to make sure that there is very rich but also standardized metadata information collected for any data that then comes into EMODnet, and there's different phases. So you can see the EMODnet, you can see the data in the process of being ingested before it's then in the phase 2 and completely ingested and integrated into EMODnet. So at every step, the user, if they would download or want information on data that's available, will be able to find that information. So they're very clear on what standards have been applied of the original data provider. That's always acknowledged, of course. And then the data are standardized and harmonized according to these European and international standards, as I mentioned. So I'll pass to Joanna to add further.
So for biodiversity data, there are a number of constraints, and some of them I think will be quite specific to biodiversity and not necessarily other disciplines. So in EMODnet biology, we don't publish only the more recent data, but we also publish historical data. So data that is currently only found in old reports, old documents, and is not necessarily digitized. So we do have a number of actions to help rescue these data from these old publications, digitize it, and then implement our standard procedures to be able to publish it via EMODnet biology, and eventually via OBIS through the EuroBIS node. So this is a long process, because in many cases it does require human intervention. It's not an automated process at all, because as you might imagine, if you have a written report with a table, sometimes the information in the table is not consistent throughout. So you need an expert to look at the data and assess what is written there and kind of translate it into what the data are and the metadata are. So this is really a quite time-consuming and human resource-consuming process. And then we also have the data availability. We all know that there are a number of research projects and monitoring programs that are undergoing, and we don't always have access to those data. And sometimes it could be because the data sharing culture is not the same across Europe, as I think everyone will understand. In some countries, it's a more closed approach to other countries, and this is something that we cannot really change, because sometimes it comes from government policies. So it's a political matter that we don't have any any way to pressure it or to change. And then we also have, on the data availability side, also we sometimes encounter the sensitivity of the data, sometimes because it's commercially sensitive, or simply because it's data related to endangered species, and we can't really disclose the exact location. So there are ways to deal with this, but again, it's sometimes a time-consuming process, because we need to agree with the data provider how the data will be shared, so that they are, reassured that nothing will be evident, and that someone can go to a specific location and just, cause a destruction of that habitat for a specific species, for example. In terms of QC, we do go through an extensive QC process before we publish any data. This is something that our partnership also does, and we assist our ad hoc providers with, I mean by ad hoc is those that are not within our consortium, with the QC as well, or we do it for them and with them. So I wouldn't say, I mean, again, it's something that is not automated. It's a semi-automated process. It does require manual intervention because many things need to be resolved by a person. They cannot be resolved by a machine. So all of these add up in terms of time and human resources. So that's kind of the constraint in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, one thing that I also wanted to ask while we were talking about data accessibility is something about findability of the data. Actually, it was very interesting to see in Kate's presentation this example of the distribution of orcas and specifically the areas where you can find them, the observations. That's something that I tried to find myself on the EMODnet portal, but unfortunately I couldn't find it. So I'm actually wondering whether that is something to do with this issue that it cannot be public, or whether it is just something that makes it difficult to find if you're not an expert in the particular field, so you don't know the keywords to use.
Well, I hope that it's the first rather than the last option. So with the centralization, we aimed to, as Kate has mentioned, to have one single point of access to all of EMODnet's data. But we can only show what we have. So it could be that we don't have that specific data that you're looking for, or for that specific area, or for that specific time period. And that it's not because the navigation and the tools that we provide are not adequate. But if that is the case, please do contact us via email and do tell us what your difficulties are, because we are in a constant process of trying, well, improving the tools that we make available to the users. So we do appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. The next question is related to one of the questions that is there in the questions and answers from the audience. And that is about the relation between your initiatives and the more global scale initiatives, such as GBIF, and others that were mentioned are GeoBond, TDWG, and SETAF. So I was wondering whether you can say a bit more about whether for IPSAT, whether you are making use of these initiatives already, and for EMODnet, whether you're also related to them. Well, you already mentioned a bit of that you are collaborating with them, but maybe you can say a bit more about how you are collaborating with them. So first, Valerio.
Yes, we work with GBIF data, and very interesting data. But I read also another question related to the licenses of iNaturalist data. This is for me a issue we are looking into. Because for me I think is restrictive to give this type of license on the data, because the scope of the app, yes, is commercial, but the scope of the app is to avoid biodiversity impact. So from my point of view, all of the information that we can put inside a tool could be useful to avoid this type of situation derived from big company. Yes, it's a commercial tool, is right, but there isn't another type of tool, free. So in this case, this is for my opinion the best option for this type of company. But we are talking internally. GBIF, from my opinion, is one of the best portal to that share the biodiversity data.
Thanks. All right, from EMODnet's side.
Joanna, would you like to answer first for this one, for the GBIF or other partnerships?
No, you can go. You can go first. if you have an answer at least.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say then is that, I mean, the ones I put on the screen are specific concrete partnerships that EMODnet Biology and Seabed Habitats already have, but there are obviously many others. There are also, I mentioned, research projects. So for example, there are a whole wealth, ever increasing amount of European projects that are working in different thematic areas. And we have dialogues through the 120 organizations or more that are part of EMODnet. We have, you know, people involved in those projects or having dialogue with those projects. So we become very aware of, you know, biodiversity data that will become available, but also those projects are very plugged into international and European initiatives. And there are discussions as well within the global community of, say, GeoBon and MBON of having, you know, European networks of those. So there's a lot of dialogue going on that we are very much linked with within Europe. I don't know, Joanna, if you'd like to say a little bit more about the more the architecture, let's say, of EMODnet Biology and how other initiatives contribute.
Yeah, I guess adding to the projects that Kate has just mentioned, we also have a requirement to collaborate and meet the needs of the regional sea conventions. So obviously, as we're focused in Europe, this is very, you know, so it's the European regional sea conventions. We also work very closely with the Ocean Biodiversity Information System and with the Global Biodiversity Information System, so OBIS and GBIF. So all of the data that is published in EMODnet Biology are also available via OBIS, and a number of data sets that we also make available are also available via GBIF. Not all yet at the moment, but the aim is to always publish all. And any data sets that we are made aware of that exist in GBIF, but are not yet in EMODnet Biology, we will try to integrate them as soon as possible as well. So there is this data flow from us to OBIS and GBIF, and the other way around from GBIF to us, and from some of the OBIS nodes as well to EMODnet Biology, as long as they cover like the European marine regions and we don't host the data, then we can also republish it in EMODnet Biology. Yeah, so I mean, some of our partners are international organizations, so some are governmental organizations. So we do have quite a wide range of partnerships, I guess. So yeah, it just adds on to the projects, the research projects that Kate was mentioning. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thanks. That's quite detailed. I was also wondering, in addition to this, whether you have also a connection with GEOS, the Group on Earth Observation System of Systems, because when I was taking a look at the same example of the ORCA distribution, I also checked whether I can find it on GEOS. And interestingly enough, I saw that there were quite a lot of overlap also with EMODnet data on GEOS as well. So I'm wondering whether it was a direct link or whether their data is sourced from the same location by both.
I can do a short answer to that, in that, yes, we have direct dialogue with GEOS. That was quite long standing, and a lot of EMODnet data was already made available through the GEOS portal and platform. But there are a number of recent updates. One being that, of course, now that we are fully centralized, it's really the time now that we are going to go back to GEOS, and now that there's a central metadata catalog, it's going to be much easier for the likes of GEOS, but also any data service around the world that would like to remotely link to EMODnet and make the metadata available in their services. It'll be much simpler to do so. So we basically were waiting until the centralization was complete to really make that next leap. And I think this will be a game changer in making the EMODnet data and data products visible or discoverable, let's say, through metadata catalogs such as the GEOS portal. There's also, through research projects that I mentioned, particularly in the Atlantic space, there is discussion in the Atlantic research community to have an Atlantic portal or metadata catalog that would really be transatlantic across the whole Atlantic Ocean. So we're in discussion with that as well to optimize whether it's tagging the metadata to make it even more discoverable, but to make sure that EMODnet regional European seas data and ones that go into the Atlantic are then made available to other regional data centers across the Atlantic and vice versa. So we can then have that discussion with the likes of SEON in South Africa that we've already initiated, but then other data services to make sure that across the world, regional data centers are more interoperable.
Yes, that's very nice. Thanks a lot for the answer. And following up on that, since you were mentioning the scope, I was actually wondering for IPSAT, for Valerio, whether you can say a bit about the scope also of BioGIS, because we saw in your presentation a lot of maps about Italy, but also you mentioned that you're using global data. So I'm wondering a bit, who are the users that you're targeting and what is the scope of BioGIS? Is it global or is it more regional?
At this stage of the application is a regional system only from Italy, because we need to phase off of budget. Okay, so we define the process, and we can define also a new country in near 45 days and produce BioGIS for any country in Europe at this stage. But now is only for Italy.
And do you see it expanding in the future, or is your primary user from Italy?
No. Our idea is to to work on this product and to expand and to try to acquire new customer. And when I said customer, for our point of view, customer are big company that work on the field, and they want to understand how they work, the impact of their work on the field. So now is a company product, so is not more a prototype, is a product, is complete. And we want to expand all over Europe.
Great, thanks for that, and good to hear about these plans. Okay, I have one more question specifically for EMODnet. Since EMODnet is already an advanced data service that has successfully integrated data and data products from several marine themes into one single platform, I was wondering, could you say a bit more about what would be, in your opinion, the key factor that made it all possible? Because it's definitely not an easy task to integrate all this data into just one single place.
All right, I'll maybe
No, it's not.
give a first answer, and then Joanna can of course add and complement. I mean, EMODnet's been going more than a decade now, and you see the fruits of all of the work. It's really the people, I would say, and the thematic expertise as a full community, the fact that the whole community, firstly under specific thematics, but now as a entirety, has come together to really agree on firstly, the fact that we need open data. This was even before there was the open data policies of Europe, but following Inspire Directive and others, EMODnet really changed the dialogue, I would say, in terms of making marine data accessible and open. And that's now the momentum across the board for all data now, with the open data policies and the requirements. But it's really the people in the communities that continuously, still, even without the thematic portals live any longer, behind the scenes, you have big consortia of thematic experts working with data ingestion, working with data collectors, working with us at the Secretariat, that we make the partnerships and dialogues also with the users together with the consortia, to have that ongoing conversation about what do we need as a society in terms of marine data, from the environment, from human activities at sea, and then collectively seeing, okay, what are the recognized European standards that we should apply to make this interoperable, and then increasingly internationally as well. The metadata is already following international standards, but we're now a regional data service which is at the table in international dialogues to make sure that the global ocean data ecosystem, which biodiversity is a component, is also interoperable. So I'll maybe leave it there and see if Joanna has
yeah, I can just add that one of the, even though, as Kate mentioned, there was indeed a lot of work, not just from the technical team, but also all of the thematic lots and their experts as well, to be able to do this, to pull this out and to centralize all of the themes in one portal, one viewer, one catalog. The truth is that we all work following the same standards. We are all Inspire compliant. We all have OGC web services. So that already helped. And obviously, you know, if you start looking at the data and the different products and everything, you will see that there are areas that we need to, all of us, we need to improve. But by adhering to the same standards, that made the process a bit easier than maybe for other, you know, initiatives that might not have the same approach that EMODnet has had from the very start, really.
Yes, thanks. Indeed, standardization is one of the keys in terms of enabling the interoperability between the different domains. And continuing on this line, I wanted to go back to the Green Deal data space and start to think a bit about how would you imagine the Green Deal data space and how would you think that it could help your case? So basically what you find exciting about the idea of the Green Deal data space and why are you part of the community in the first place? So Valerio?
For us, it could be, you know, the first sources where all the, you know, the data are related. So in this case, we could have, you know, a big opportunity to have one data space where all the most important sources are inside and can share to the customer that need to have not the best sources, but they want to have the regulated sources. So it's strange to say, but perhaps if we found some data that have a big, you know, a more quality, but is not official, the customer want the official data. Also, if the data are not, you know, the best. So in this case, the Green Deal could help us to have, you know, the first big, you know, group of official sources to work on.
So data curation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good to know about that, because indeed that is a big discussion that we're having in the project about how much we should focus on this data curation and data quality issues. So it's very useful feedback for us. Yes.
I imagine this is a great question.
Yeah. All right. And how about from the EMODnet side? What do you find the most exciting about the Green Deal data space?
So I'll start by saying, of course, in the great project is really doing sessions like this and talking to various different communities to really inform what the Green Deal data space should look like. So I think that's not yet decided. That's the first thing to say. And from the EMODnet perspective, I mean, if you look at EMODnet, it's not just one you know, thematic data service and one infrastructure. It's really in itself a whole ecosystem of federated infrastructures and thematic expertise that's very cross thematic. So what it's achieved in the last 10 years and what it is today, an operational in situ marine service across different themes, I think is one case study or example of how the Green Deal data space could look, because to the user, EMODnet is one website, one searchable engine, and that really you can navigate, discover, download data and data products from across different themes. And then if you think of the step above, the EU Green Deal requires data not just from the marine, but from many cross domain entities and areas. And so by having those discussions with the marine, with other domains, and seeing what maturity they're at, how they operate in terms of their infrastructures, I think is a really interesting to have. And ultimately, having a one-stop shop infrastructure for the Green Deal data space is probably not realistic or needed, because you have these hubs already for, say, marine, for other thematics that will be able to feed in, to a future data space, whatever that will look like. But from the EMODnet perspective of what we can benefit from the Green Deal data space, having the marine community are now increasingly aware of EMODnet and are using EMODnet, and that's obviously growing and diversifying. But having users from other domains, from, say, security or space sector or health sector using EMODnet data, that's still emerging, I would say. And so a Green Deal data space where EMODnet together with other data would be a sort of marketplace for discovering data across domains and having it interoperable, which is also really challenging. It's already been challenging just for marine. That will be a sort of game changer and would increase the use and the impact of EMODnet data. So that would also be a sort of, a bi-directional benefit, I would say.
Yeah, indeed. Is there anything you would like to add, Jana?
No, I guess it's what Kate was mentioning. It's exposure to a wider community that we might not be targeting at the moment. So I think that's the main benefits, at least just off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Indeed, that's a big reason why we have the Green Deal data space idea to begin with, is to make sure that even broader circle of people and practitioners have access to all the data, making it a bit easier for everyone to find what they need. So I was also wondering, from the other way around, how do you see your initiatives contributing to the Green Deal data space? From IPSAT's perspective, you're also producing data, and I was wondering if you can see the Green Deal data space as a way to also make the data easier to access, for example?
Yes, for sure. This could be, first things. Another one that we are looking when we found the data is related to the capability, of the administration that have the sources that need to be published. A sort of document manual, so to figure out the best way to publish the data. And in Italy we are talking on that and making a score of from 0 to 5 to the administration that have the best or the worst way to publish the data. So there is standard already defined in GIS. So we have a lot of standard. Inspire is one of them. It is the most important. So if they follow some rules that are already in the market, and it could be very simple for all to make the the right job on the data.
Yeah, indeed. That is something that we're definitely looking
No,
at.
we do not need to, you know, to define new rules
Yeah.
or to, you know, invent in Italy, we said to invent the hot water.
Yes.
So it's not important. The rules are very clear, and the way to put the rules on, you know, on the data is also very clear.
Yes, indeed. We are definitely taking a look at the different standards and the ones that the community is actually making use of and want to make use of in the future to make it also future-proof. And anything from EMODnet side quickly?
Just quickly building on the previous answers that Joanna and I gave, I mean, EMODnet is recognized as a best practice or a European authority in the marine in situ data space. So, you know, this can be a contribution to the future Green Deal data space and also the dialogue in how such infrastructures federations could operate.
Yes, for sure. There's a lot that we can learn from EMODnet in this project as well. Okay, then if there's no more to add from this point, then I think we should go to the questions and answers part. Also because there are several questions that are related to the presentation that Sotiris was giving. So we can start with those. And on my list, I see the first question being that it sounds like your perception of a European biodiversity data space to encompass a connection from data owners, for example, public monitoring or an EA project, to an intermediary at a European level. And can you expand on this?
Yes, well, I think this idea is reflected also from EMODnet, and I mean there are all these systems out there like EMODnet, like FISA. Obviously, they're systems that they're built up. They have their communities, their governance. I mean, they are. There's no. I don't think there's any kind of suspicion that at some point they will be kind of absorbed by the Green Deal data space. Is the opposite. Actually, they should be there. They should continue what they're doing, building with their communities, the data, and so on. But the Green Deal data space should build on top of them. And the way I think one way forward. I mean, we could consider a scenario where all these data are kind of accessible through a single point or like a search engine. Where people could find them more easily or could be directed to those places. Or for instance, Valerio mentioned about the quality of the data. So even these systems could benefit from that by getting feedback from the users. Okay, just to steer the debate, right? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine a little bit how, you know, keeping those infrastructure alive and of course building on their capabilities and their capacities, and perhaps putting a layer on top of those infrastructures in a federated way. We could make the data more easily accessible and then collect feedback from the users, for instance. And then, yes, about intermediaries, I think this is a model that Valerio also explained. I mean, I think people in Europe who have the business model is based on actually having access to open data from open public data. I think they expect some upgrade of the services in order to stream channel all this public information to their business model. I think this is something that we need to take into consideration. Then, for me, the question is, on one hand, we could have these intermediaries, you know, doing what they're doing, business as usual. So they get this information and they try to find the right channel to publish the information to their customers. But then we could even consider like longer trails of data. I said earlier the example of the ESG reporting. You know, what happens now is that companies, they collect data, they buy data, they go to open sources, they find data, they draft their reports. and then they pass over the reports to auditors, and then auditors, they might even challenge the data by looking to other data, or even the civil society does that. We've seen NGOs, we've seen academia challenging reports from companies and big corporate undertakings, so they look for data too. And then the public sector is interested in those data. So I'm just wondering if this intermediary model later on can be expanded into longer data trails, where all this information is some kind of streamlined in this data space and is being made available in a transparent way to those who need to know. And there has been examples out there. I mean, at least I know at least one example in Canada, in the mining sector. They're kind of exploring use cases like this, where all this ESG reporting, validation, verification is actually streamlined in the digital space. And even verifications are done in the digital space. So it's like, you know, the reports are cryptographically signed, and then later on they cannot be changed. Okay, I'll stop here. This is just to steer the debate. And to answer the question, yes, intermediaries, I think they will keep playing a very big role in this data space. To me, the question mark is do we continue doing this as a business as usual, like data input, data output, or we try to see a little bit longer data trails as well as the ones I described?
Yes, thank you very much for the answer. And I think we will, if there's time left, come back to the security point that you were mentioning. But there's also another question for you from the audience. And the question is there any link between the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the EU Taxonomy for Sustainable Activities?
Yes, there is a link, obviously. I suppose when an investor, be it private or public, I mean, the public sector as a first customer, if they jump into and try to see whether they want to invest or subsidize specific plan, I suppose they can look into both the ESG reporting and the financial EU taxonomy to see if this particular undertaking is contributing, let's say, to the climate neutrality targets and the green economy and regenerative economy. So I think there's a link. I don't see a link necessarily with the biodiversity, but in principle there's a link, of course, for sure.
Okay, great, thanks. And now we have, I think, questions that are a bit more generic, although it could also be related to what you were mentioning. So there is one question about which actions are you taking or planning to take to build on top of the efforts already made to implement the Inspire directive and assure a proper alignment. So this is probably for all speakers and perhaps also for Soterios.
Well, as far as I know, I mean, first of all, it's great to hear that. I mean, Inspire Directive is quite a successful directive, I think. I mean, it's if I can say, there's a penetration of that directive in many communities. We've seen that in the maritime community, other communities as well. I mean, myself, in the back a few years ago when I was working in the field, I mean, Inspire Directive was always on the top of the list of the things we were consulting. And I think it has a place, a special place in the Green Deal data space in regards of data formats, metadata, and so on. My colleague Yuri Robert is leading a task on green data for all, and I think they're investigating. You know, they're putting on the table the Inspire Directive, but as well the recent developments that have taken place, like Open Data Directive. Even other directives like regarding data strategy, like the Data Act and so on. And I think they're trying to see if there's place for updates in the Inspire Directive in this respect. But of course, this is ongoing. It's an ongoing process. For the moment, I think the key point is that Inspire Directive is a pillar for the data that are going to be shared in the green data space, and I think that's a key point.
Yeah, thanks for the overview. And yeah, Kate, I think was.
Yes, I was typing a response as you asked the question, so I could maybe just explain a little bit and then maybe still post it. Absolutely. I mean, as Joanna and I have said, EMODnet from the beginning has complied with Inspire and follows the evolution of this, of course. But at this point in time, we believe the national or member state level and the link with national and EMODnet European level is really important. And this really builds on the communication that came out in December last year related to the Open Data Directive. So this builds on, previous communications, but it really specifies not only more about the high value data sets that member states and others should share openly in fair formats, but also it gives direction to the member states on the appropriate data policy. So the Creative Commons BY 4.0 license as a minimum, which EMODnet already adheres to, but which, depending on the country or the data service, is not quite optimized yet. And also it gives direction on how the member state should provide access to these data. So it's, as I mentioned, for EMODnet, providing data not just in a way that a human can search for it, but with APIs and machine readable formats, which again is something that's increasingly common at the national data service or other member state service level, but it's not across the board. So it's really giving hopefully more motivation for that. And that in turn will increase the data discovery and the opportunity for EMODnet to harvest those types of data and make sure that we're having those dialogues on standardizations, etc. But it should increase the offer of people being able to search for common data and more integrated data. So I think that's one of the aspects of the Inspire that EMODnet as a community is now looking into.
Yeah, thanks a lot. There's one more question that is actually very relevant from the All Data for Green Deal project, Juan Maso, and he is asking that it could be fantastic to have the EMODnet integrated in the Green Deal data space, but what does that mean in practice? Because the services from EMODnet are already available. So technically, what we need is a list of the participants in the Green Deal data space, and is that it? And he's also adding that, or do we need the super metadata catalog of the Green Deal data space, federated such as the GEOS DAB?
Well, I said in my long intervention before, I said we shouldn't be looking at like rigid integrations, but more loosely coupled integrations between the existing legacy systems and the green data space. I mean, one can think many examples. The metadata, I mean, the super metadata catalog is one, or like a search engine is one. As I said, one could have even feedback, or I mean, there could be an extra layer on top of these legacy systems collecting information about access to data, feedback from the users, and so on. I don't think we're looking into a kind of, as I said, rigid, strict integration of systems, like loose communication between systems to enable users to have better access to the data and to enable their experience and so on. And probably in the course of the time, this might also affect priorities on the system side. For instance, if people are going there to download data, or they prefer data to use them as a service or through APIs, this might, it's not sure, might kind of influence the strategic decisions that these systems make in the future. But of course, we don't know. I think the low-hanging fruit, as I said at the beginning, is some kind of loose integration. The legacy systems, they have their own governance system, they have the services, they should continue developing them as they do, because they do it really well, as we see in the EMODnet presentation. But then another on top layer on these things is could add some value in those systems as well. I don't know if this makes sense, but that's I think low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
I would just add, building on Satiris's intervention, absolutely, in terms of building on current capacity or capability. I mean, for EMODnet, we now have across the board quite a rich standardized metadata information. For different thematics, they may have additional metadata information, which is specific to that thematic or their users, which is great. But this is the model we can use going forward also for the Green Deal, and it links to a comment in the chat about semantic interoperability. There are ways that we can add more metadata terms or tagging of data in semantics to make, firstly, we are indeed looking at essential variables, linking with the ocean observation community to make sure that data in the future can be increasingly not just quality controlled as it is now, but maybe have stamps or tags that say, yes, this is a trusted EOV, essential ocean variable, or essential biodiversity variable that can be used for global as well as European policy management or other uses. But also we could maybe look into doing, as a wider community for the Green Deal data space, tagging data that is relevant for the Green Deal as, Green Deal relevant, for example. So I think there's lots of opportunities that we keep evolving the services like EMODnet, but also in other domains, and then look how we can not change what we're doing, but add, to make it even more interoperable.
Yeah, thanks indeed. In the great project, we're also looking into this specific ability to tag different data sets depending on the quality levels, but also making the system quite flexible so that it would be possible to add, as you mentioned, some metadata that is specific from a particular domain and still be able to easily find the ones that they're looking for. And Jean Mousseau is also asking whether we can actually ask this additional work from EMODnet to be really done, as you just mentioned, Kate. Do you have resources to implement this?
I didn't see that second question, but thanks for raising that. Well, EMODnet has developed over the last decade. As I mentioned, I think at the beginning of an earlier question, it's funded by MFAF, so it's funded as a European initiative, but at the moment as different consortia for the different thematics, as Joanna mentioned. This has been set up really as a huge community effort with quite, reasonable but restricted funding that's got us up to this level. It's really been a huge community effort to get there. Going forward, in terms of if you want to then maintain that service and add more, more layers in terms of making it more interoperable, connecting with different domains, of course, that's another level in the operational service, which might require additional funding, or looking at ways of governance for EMODnet that would be more optimized for the service that it is today, because it's still the same governance as we've had since a decade or more, and that could be interesting to look at. But yeah, absolutely, I think the community is committed. It's just a question of, as you said, resources.
Yeah, great, thanks a lot. Okay, I think that's all the time that we have for the questions for now. So I would like to give the floor back to Nevena to round off the event.
Thank you so much, Dainius, and thank you so much for all the panelists and the great presentations. I think we could see also from the questions, the interest about the concept of the Green Deal data space, and I think also someone was saying that I can see it's still not clear. Indeed, it's not clear. We are in a preparatory phase. We are exploring. We are expanding. So I think these kind of conversations, such as the one that we had today, are crucial, are important, and also initiatives like the one that Valerio presented from Italy, or of course the work that EMODnet is doing is a crucial contributor to the future of the Green Deal data space. So once again, thank you for joining. And before letting you leave, I would like to share very quickly some updates about the project, where you can meet us, where you can see us. So in case you would like to continue, the engagement with the Green Deal Data Space project, we will be present in many events in the upcoming months, especially in June. We have a quite busy month ahead of us. So first of all, we will have a panel which will focus on business models at the Expandeo. That's annual conference from our partner EORSC. And there will be a discussion from that perspective. Then some of our colleagues will join the Data Week, which is mainly organized by the Big Data Value Forum, Big Data Value Association. And there we will have a panel together with the Technology University of Lulea and discuss, how we can use data to tackle the challenges caused by the climate change. But there also our panelists will be coming from different places. But of course, for instance, we will have one of our partner presented ECMWF. And then we also have other two conferences. So there will be the EGI conference in Poznan, and EGI is the technical lead of the project. So there we are working on a panel where we would invite, different sectoral data spaces just to discuss the governance schemes and the business models, because that's also one of the deliverable that currently we are working on. And then lastly, there is another data week, but more from the OGC community, where we will have more a deep dive into the priority data list. And there, of course, as you could hear, there are other projects as well. So I'm very happy to see here today also Johan Mazot from the AD for GD. So this will be an event where we can meet this bigger community who is really working to build a green data space. So in case you want to get more information, I'm just sharing here, of course, the website of the project. There you can find all of these events and all the links and informations. And then, of course, you can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, where we are trying to keep our pages up to date and share the relevant information with all of you. So thank you so much for the panelists, and thank you for everyone who contributed to this event. And with that, I would close this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.